Okay, welcome back. Really, let's just jump right into this. This is a dining room table we are building, a round table that I sell directly off my website. It's one of the catalog pieces we have. This particular one is headed to California. Really cool that I got an order out of state. Always appreciate that. The power of the internet and all this social media. It works out. We're starting off by just skim milling all of our parts, so all of our boards. We have walnut, and in rough state walnut is hard to see the grain and the sap. So the wider boards, Robert's running through the planer, and then the narrow boards you just saw me running through my S4S machine. It can only handle 7.5 widths, so anything wider than that we have to send through the planer. Kind of analyze what we want for the tabletop and what we want for legs.
Here,
you're gonna have 50 inches.
we'll have 50.
And you can put that on either side.
Okay, yeah, that'll work.
And
A 50 and a 50, that gives you
That gives you 40 on the width, and then you need
that gives
shorter.
you 50. Because each one of these is 10. So if you add one each side, you got 5. I mean, it's roughly 50.
Yeah.
So you just need to add another. Yeah, you got plenty. All right, let's do that.
But we want to leave drop off of this for the fourth leg.
Yeah, somehow.
Yeah.
This will be your outside.
Make it work.
Yeah. And then this will be outside faces of legs here. I think that'll look cool.
That'll look awesome.
Yeah, and then we'll, just use whatever matches best color-wise as filler.
Looks like
This could be a
Here.
good stretcher.
you grab that.
And then this could be our stretcher board too.
Did you hear it grab that knot?
Yeah. I was like, what was that?
Like a big old pop.
Just came flying out of there, didn't it?
Boom. Yeah. And
kinda
pieces of it were too heavy for it to suck up.
Oh, it was just like floating there?
Floating around in the tube.
Yeah, whenever you have those open, you don't have a lot of
Yeah.
suction. All right, we got a game plan.
Okay, so once we got our parts figured out, I've gone ahead and glued up leg blanks. So these are, I want to say 4 inches by 3.5 inches, and they get a taper on one face. Now the cool thing about this table design is it has a splayed foot, so the feet angle out on the base of this table. And so that's why you see this leg blank cradled at an angle. I think it's 7 degrees in this basically jig on the CNC. The CNC is going to use a 1/2 inch spiral bit to cut out a mortise slightly bigger than a 1/2 inch, and that is going to, so that the mortise is actually going to angle through the leg as opposed to being 90 degree to the face of the leg. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll cut that mortise in 90 degrees to the face because it's easy to do, and then we'll angle the tenon into the leg. So for this piece, I just really like the idea of having the mortise at an angle through the leg, and then the tenon, the shoulder of the tenon, angled to match the splay of the leg. This will all make sense as you see it unfold. Crank on the bandsaw here. This is my old Oliver number 36 bandsaw, built in 1925, and when Robert's using it here to cut out the tapers on these legs. So only the back side of the leg gets a taper, which actually complicates the joinery a little bit more because not only do you have the splay angle, but now you have the angle of the taper. And one thing when you introduce joinery into those angles, you have to make sure all of them are the same across all 4 legs, or else you're making each individual part to fit that leg, and it just becomes a lot of work. You want everything to be similar. So Robert starts off by roughing out the taper on all 4 legs, and then he made a really cool jig on the planer to plane all these. Basically, one pass cleans off the bandsaw marks, and then you circle over to the wide belt and you sand it down to 150 grit, and it is done. It's a pretty cool setup. Now, a little bit of overview on the table. This is a 60-inch diameter table, obviously made out of walnut. It's called the McCurley table. It's a design I came up with several years ago for some good friends of mine, and like I said, I sell it directly off my website. So if you're interested, I'll link that in the description.
All right, so Robert knocked out this tapering jig, and it worked beautifully, man. Great job. Explain how this worked. Give it the rundown.
We made some mistakes. We got ahead of ourselves. But no, it's just a real simple 3/4 shim. We figured out that's how much it was for our rise that we needed. So a little shim down here, a little support piece in the middle, rough cut them on the bandsaw.
One pass.
One pass on the
One
planer.
pass to clean it. Now we can run them through the wide belt.
Yeah.
And they're sanded. Beautiful. That's good.
Okay, so even though we have the expensive fancy CNC, we still have to come back by hand and square up these mortises. I do not like round tenons in these. I want a square tenon. And so since, as I spoke earlier, the tenon is angling through the leg, we have to angle our chisel through as well when we square this up. So we just get some drop off from the cut we made that has the angle we want, clamp it down right on the edge of that mortise, and then we can use that as a guide for our chisel, the back of our chisel to go against, and hammer it down. And basically the most important thing here is trying to keep the chisel straight front to back. If you're facing it, it's easy to go off at an angle. If you can keep it on that block and then keep it straight front to back at 90, you can chisel about halfway or more down, flip the part over, and do the same thing, and you should meet perfectly, no issues. So Robert and I spend some time at the bench. It's always enjoyable to get to bust out the chisels and do work like this, squaring up all these mortises. Okay, so now we turn our attention to the tenon. So these are two stretchers that go underneath. They'll have a really cool arch on them, and they're actually competing arches, I guess, if that's the right terminology. The bottom arch is a little bit different radius than the top arch, which adds really to the design. I think it's pretty cool. That's a bit of a side note. Back to this joinery. So I scribe all of my shoulder lines with a marking gauge and hand tools with a knife wall. Everything gets laid out that way just because I know that's super accurate. And then I use my table saw as if it was a hand saw and just work up to those layout lines and cut these shoulders, because these shoulders are at an angle to match the splay of the legs and also the taper. In order for those to shoulder up properly, I have to get that angle dialed in. So once I get my dado stack and I cut on that shoulder, I just work over and take the waist out, and I can only do 2 faces of the tenons on each side, and then I got to change my fence and do the other side of those tenons. A quick test fit here just to make sure. Now we're drawboring this joint, so I don't want a very tight fit here. I want it to fit well, obviously we don't want gaps, but we want it to be able to slide in pretty easily. That way we're not fighting it trying to pull it together with the drawbore. The easiest way for me always to clean off the access shoulder material, top and bottom, is to just use a handsaw. So I'll go to the bandsaw, I'll make the vertical cut down the tenon to my shoulder, and then I'll come out with a handsaw and a chisel and finish the rest of it off by hand. When you have the layout lines scribed with a marking knife, it makes this really easy, because basically I can work back to that marking line and put my chisel blade right in that line and get a perfect, nice shoulder right there. So circling back to what I said, the first cut's on the bandsaw. This is kind of backwards in how I edited it, but this was the first initial cut that establishes where that tenon's going to position on the part, and then I come back by hand and take that waist out. It's a little bit offset from center because, like I explained earlier, the arches are a little bit different radiuses, so the tenon is actually a little bit offset from the center of this piece.
Unless you feel like you can do it yourself.
Yeah, I just need some help getting pieces down there.
Get this ship footage real quick.
Yeah, no, you do your thing. I'll get the bench set up and whatever.
Now this is a great tool to add to your cabinet if you don't have one. This is a shoulder plane made by Lee Nielsen. And so if I'm a little bit off, it's really hard on the table saw to go around and line up your shoulders. It's easy to get just a little bit off, but if I have my marking lines, I can use that shoulder plane and cut right to them and clean up any discrepancies in that shoulder. And it's really minimal here, so I just, 2 or 3 passes and I can get the shoulders to line up just like I need them. So that way when I pull this joint together, that shoulder is contacting all the way around the whole workpiece. I'm over here laying out holes for the drawbore. So a drawbore is something I've done on this channel before. It's basically an offset hole between your mortise part and your tenon part that when you drive a pin or a dowel through, it pulls the joint together. You don't need clamps. So the first thing you're going to do is drill the hole in your mortise piece. So this is our leg, and we're drilling. I'm actually doing 5/8 drawbores. These are big, probably a bit overkill, but I like the look of it. This is just kind of a big, kind of timber frame looking base. Always set the stop on my drill press so that the tip of that brad point goes through the workpiece, and then I can flip it and finish my cut, finish my hole from the other side. That way you don't get any blowout. You don't have to worry about putting a sacrificial board or anything like that. It makes it pretty easy. So we'll assemble the base, put the apron in or the stretcher in, and then I'll drop the drill bit in and lightly mark where that hole lines up to the tenon. You don't want to do too heavy here, because if you put a big, huge indention in it, it's going to make it hard to move it over, because it's just a slight move of the hole to get that drawbore effect. On this particular one, we went a 1/16, which is a pretty heavy jump. But when you have this thick, it's a 5/8 dowel, it should work fine. Now, I will say, drawboring is executed properly is not easy. The thing that happens is you can break your pin. If you get your holes too far offset, it becomes too hard for the pin to drive it closed, and it also stresses the tenon to the point where it can crack it. And we had that issue on this particular one. There was one that gave us a lot of issue. We broke the drawbore way to drill it out and just kind of put a decorative piece in. Almost every time I do a drawbore, I end up doing this. It's hard. It's a real fine line you ride to getting it in the right spot. And usually I probably step it over. Better would be more like a 30-second step, just enough for that pin to push the tenon up against the workpiece. And you can see I'm using my dividers to move it, and it's probably heavier than a 1/16 right there. So I'm putting one end of the dividers into the hole I marked, and then the other end is marking where I want to drill my new hole, and that establishes the offset. And this is the coolest part of the process, by far the coolest part of this video. Keep your eye on the shoulder of this joint when we drive this peg in, and watch the glue squeeze out. No clamps necessary on this. It sucks it down tight right here. And that's pretty awesome. I mean, it's fun to do this. It's a lot of fun. Now, you want to use a hammer. Don't use a mallet or anything. You use a hammer. You get a nice good blow. Make sure you don't graze the pin, because you can break these pins real easily. And if you break them off in there, it's just kind of a hassle to fix it. You want to select straight grain wood for your pins, for your dowels. Don't want some crazy curly wood that's going to snap or break real easy. I used walnut because I don't want contrasting woods, but a straight grain oak or hickory would be the best case scenario for you.
Yeah, I try to go like that, but sometimes it's hard to tell.
And you can just see how awesome that looks. We're going to do it one more time, a little bit sped up here. My hand's in the way, but again, you see the glue squeezing out. No clamps necessary. It's a cool joint, and it would be really hard to clamp this because of the angle of the legs. Okay, so here's a cool trick on how to clean up the excess dowels or pins. I'm borrowing my apprentice, cool little Japanese saw. I've never used Japanese saws, and he owns one, and I just kind of find myself using it. I like it. It's a cool saw. It's great at kind of flushing things up. So I've got a piece of 1/2-inch ply there. I just kind of flushed it to the surface of that ply. It's got a hole in it, as you can tell. And then I set this is a spiral upcut bit. That's really important. Otherwise, you're going to blow out fibers everywhere and make this look real ugly. and do a little climb pass around these and then clean them off, and you can surface them all to the same height and then carve a little detail in them with a knife. It's pretty cool little process. The trick is using the upcut spiral bit. If you're using a down cut, you're going to be pushing, it's the wrong cut direction, so you're going to be chipping out the fibers on these pins and it'll look real bad. So make sure you get the upcut. Okay, so this is some footage Robert shot. He is taking over the camera some. I tasked him with cutting the tapers and doing the whole top of this assembly of this table, and he made a cool tapering jig, and this is actually my first time seeing it, and it worked great. I almost thought he was going to cut through a clamp, but I know he's smarter than that. So it looks like you just cut the taper, pull the part out, flip it over, put the other one in. You just have to stop and turn the saw off, which, you know, nothing wrong with that. That's a good system. Good thing about jigs like this is it keeps everything consistent and the same, which is always nice. And plus, now we have a jig to use. The next time we build this, if you guys want to order one, we'll have it all set up and ready to go. Alright, so I have to apologize. The end of this video kind of got away from me. Everything kind of, I don't know, happened quick at the end, and we just didn't get good footage. So what you're seeing right there with Robert was him working on the supports that hold the tabletop, and those actually get attached to the base using a jig that we make that straddles the two legs and allows you to run a router and cut a pocket for those supports to drop into, and then those supports half lap each other. So they drop into the legs, get some nice long solid screws and glue to hold them in place, and then the actual supports half lap over each other. And from there, the tabletop goes down on the supports, and we use buttons to screw it up and attach it to the actual base, which you see Robert doing right here. I've actually built this table before on this channel several years ago. I think I did a 2-part video series on this table. I'm gonna link it in the description, so if you wanna see more of the action, it's a little bit different approach in that video. Before I had the CNC, I was building it more with hand tools, and this is a production piece that we sell off the website, so it's something that we try to streamline the process. And with the CNC in the shop now, this was the first time we implemented it in cutting out joinery and mortises and stuff like that. So, you know, a little different style of video, which is kind of cool to see the comparison between the older way I used to build and then now how we can use the CNC to streamline our production. Okay, so that's going to shut it down for this video. I just want to say thanks to you guys for tuning in. For those who watch these videos, leave me a comment, let me know what you think. We've got some really cool content coming your way. An amazing live edge table build that I just finished. We delivered it this week. You can see some sneak peeks of that over on my Instagram, and I'll have a build video for that. And then we're building a really complicated and cool waterfall table with veneers and all that stuff. Working on that right now in the shop. So exciting stuff headed your way. Stay tuned. Like I said, thank you as always for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Okay, this is the finished table, kind of a last minute thing here. This is going out the door right now. The trucking company just showed up. This really came out looking great. I just want to say thanks to my good friends from California who ordered this. I appreciate the support. It's always amazing when you get people who order things through the internet out of state, and I hope they enjoy this table for many, many years. A quick overview. Robert right now is putting the buttons in. We got the through mortise and tenons, the drawbores, and that's basically it. There's a half lap on there, half lap up top. Just a really clean, nice looking table, and I'm excited to get the opportunity to build another one of these.